Andre Washington was 41 years old, a senior structural engineer who had spent 16 years designing the bones of buildings that other people would put their names on. He kept a drafting pencil behind his ear on most days, and a second one in the pocket of whatever jacket he was wearing, because losing a pencil mid-thought was the kind of interruption he had never learned to tolerate. He drove a 10-year-old Volvo he called reliable, and meant it. He was not a man who made noise about what he knew. He made things with what he knew, and let the things speak. He was informed on a Tuesday morning in late February that the structural engineering firm he had worked at for 11 years was being acquired, that his division was being dissolved as redundant, and that his position was eliminated effective immediately, with 6 weeks of severance. He had been given a sealed envelope and walked to the elevator by a man from HR, whose name he had never learned and did not learn that morning. He sat in his car in the parking garage for 9 minutes. Then his phone showed a notification from a legal service application. A document had been filed with the court. He sat in the parking garage for 4 more minutes. Then, he drove home. His wife had no idea what he was about to build. Neither, entirely, did he. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The light in the parking garage was the flat fluorescent light of a place designed for function and not for anything else. That was a Tuesday in February, and Andre had been in that garage dozens of times over 11 years, and he had never noticed what kind of light it had until the morning he sat in it for 13 minutes, with an HR envelope in his lap and a court filing notification on his phone. He read the notification. He opened the linked document. He read the first page and understood what it was, and closed the application and put the phone in the cup holder. He sat for a moment longer. He started the Volvo. He drove home. He walked through the front door of the house at 10:47 in the morning, which was not a time he was typically home, and he set the HR envelope on the kitchen counter and sat at the table and looked out the window at the yard. The river birch he had planted the second spring of their time in the house, now 10 feet tall, moving slightly in the February wind. Janelle was not home. She was at work. She had filed from her office. Apparently, he did not know what to make of that specifically. He filed it in the part of himself where he put things he would process later. He made coffee. He opened his laptop. He had been carrying an idea for 2 years, a specific technical idea, the kind that lives in the gap between what a field can currently do and what it should be able to do, and he had never had the time to give it the attention it deserved, because giving it that attention would have meant taking that attention from the job he showed up for every morning. He had told himself he would get to it. He had always meant to get to it. He had time now. He opened a new document. He wrote the idea down from the beginning, the way he had never let himself write it before. Completely, without editing for someone else's comprehension, without shortcutting the technical complexity. He wrote for 4 hours. At 2:43 in the afternoon, he called a man named Victor Osai, who had been his closest colleague through the first 7 years of his career, and who had left the firm 4 years ago to start an infrastructure technology company that was doing things in computational structural analysis that most of the industry was not paying attention to yet. "I need to tell you something," Andre said. "2 things." Victor said, "Tell me." He told him both things. Victor was quiet through each of them. Then Victor said, "Come to my office tomorrow morning." "Early," Andre said. "How early?" Victor said, "How early can you be there?" Andre said, 6:30. Victor said, 6:30. He hung up. He looked at the 4 hours of writing on his screen. He looked at the river birch in the yard. He had no idea, sitting at that table, that what he had written in those 4 hours was going to be in front of an acquisition committee in 22 months. He had an idea that it was good. He had spent 16 years developing the ability to know when something was structurally sound. This was structurally sound. He would mark that Tuesday in February as the day the calendar reset. Andre had come to structural engineering through architecture. He had started in design before he understood that what interested him was not how buildings looked, but how they held. The invisible system beneath the visible one. The load path. The transfer. The way force moved through a structure without anyone who lived in it ever needing to think about it. He had shifted tracks at 25, gotten his structural PE at 28, joined the firm at 30 after 2 years in a smaller practice where he learned what the field could do and began to understand what it couldn't. He drove the Volvo because the Volvo worked. He kept 2 drafting pencils because he had learned young that a man who relied on one of anything was always one failure away from a stop. He was the kind of engineer who, when a building's design came across his desk with a load assumption he didn't trust, called the architect and asked for the calculation before he stamped anything. Not because he was difficult, because he was responsible for what he stamped. And responsibility was not a concept he applied selectively. He had brought that same quality to his marriage. He had shown up for it fully, without performing the effort involved. He had covered the cost of Janelle's EMBA program, $74,000 over 3 years, paid from his salary while she was in classes and working reduced hours, because it was an investment in something he believed in, and he believed in it because he believed in her. He had not kept a ledger. He had not mentioned the number. He had noticed, in the 18 months before the parking garage, the accumulation of changes that a man notices when he is paying the right kind of attention. The distance that opens in a room without anyone announcing it. The way she stopped asking about his work, not suddenly, but gradually. The way a door closes when the hinge is loose rather than when someone pushes it. The evenings she spent in the other room with her laptop without explanation. The quality of her attention when he spoke, which had shifted from present to processing something else. He had told himself she was building her career. He had told himself the EMBA had opened ambitions that were still finding their shape. He had extended that interpretation for longer than the evidence warranted. His former colleague at the firm, a woman named Frances who was 61 and had spent 34 years in structural engineering and had the specific sharpness of someone who had been underestimated so many times that she had stopped noting it individually, had said to him once, in the break room over 2 cups of bad coffee, "You design structures that transfer weight to the places that can carry it. But you carry everything yourself, Andre. You've never once asked someone else to hold a load for you." He had said, "That's what I know how to do." She had said, "I know. That's why I'm saying it." That was what Janelle had not understood about the man she had filed against on a Tuesday morning while he was being walked to an elevator by a man from HR. She had filed against the man she believed she was leaving. She had no idea who he was about to become. Her name was Frances Okafor. 61 years old. The same Frances from the break room, his colleague of 9 years, the one who had spent 34 years in structural engineering and had developed, across those years, the particular combination of technical authority and meticulous documentation that made her the person everyone at the firm brought their hardest problems to before they brought them anywhere else. She had come to the parking garage on the Tuesday morning, 30 minutes after Andre drove away, because she had been present when the HR notification came through the division's internal system and had understood, before he did, what it meant and what he was about to walk into. She had watched him receive the envelope. She had watched the elevator doors close. She had waited 30 minutes because she knew he needed 30 minutes. Then, she had gone to her own car and called him. He hadn't answered. He was already at the table with the 4 hours of writing in front of him. She called again at 4 in the afternoon. He picked up. She said, "I've been trying to reach you." He said, "I know. I was in the middle of something." She said, "Are you all right?" He said, "I will be." "Francis, I have something I need to show you. Can you come by tomorrow evening?" She came the following Wednesday evening at 6 and sat at the kitchen table that Andre had already cleared and arranged the way he arranged things before a serious conversation, laptop open, printed pages stacked. The 4 hours of writing organized into a document that was now 12 pages long because he had kept going Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. She read it in silence, all 12 pages. She read with her reading glasses on and her chin slightly raised, the way she read everything that mattered. When she finished, she set the last page down and looked at him over the tops of the glasses. She said, "How long have you had this?" He said, 2 years of pieces, 4 days of the complete version. She said, "Have you shown this to Victor?" He said, "Tomorrow morning." She said, "Good." She reached across the table and refilled his coffee without asking. She said, "I want to be part of this, if you'll let me." He looked at her for a moment. He said, "I was hoping you'd say that." She had kept records of her own, not of his marriage, of his work. 9 years of peer review notes, technical memos, the specific assessments she had written on projects he had led. She opened her own folder on the table beside his document. "I started keeping these in year 2, she said, "because I understood by year 2 what kind of engineer you were." She pushed the folder toward him. "If you're going to put something in front of investors, they're going to want to know who built it. This is who built it." He looked at the folder. He looked at the 9 years of her documentation on his work. He picked it up. He read the top page. He set it down. "There's one more thing," she said. She placed the last sheet on the table, separately. The firm's non-compete clause. I've been reading it for 2 days. The clause applies to client solicitation and project methodology. It does not apply to independent technical research or novel intellectual property developed without the use of firm resources. She looked at him. "What you built in those 4 days, did you use any firm resources to build it?" He thought about it. His laptop, his pencils, his kitchen table. "No," he said. "Then it's yours," she said. Entirely, he stood over everything the way he stood over a complex structural calculation, not reading any single piece, reading all of it together. The 12 pages, the 9 years of Francis's documentation, the non-compete analysis. Victor at 6:30 in the morning. He could see the load path clearly. He could see where the weight would bear. He sat back down at the table. "Let's build it," he said. He didn't move fast. He moved correctly. There is a difference, and it matters most in the places where the two things feel like the same thing. Victor Osei had built his infrastructure technology company over 4 years into something that had strategic capital, an existing client base, and, most relevantly, a computational platform that needed exactly the kind of structural analysis methodology that Andre had been developing in the margins of his other life. The 6:30 meeting lasted 4 hours. Victor said almost nothing for the first 90 minutes while Andre walked through the technical framework on the whiteboard in Victor's conference room. And then, he said everything he needed to say in the next 30. The licensing agreement between Andre's newly formed firm, Washington Structural Analytics, and Victor's company was drafted by a technology IP attorney named Grace Mbeki over the following 3 weeks. Grace was 49, precise, and had the specific ability to read a licensing clause and understand not only what it said, but what it would mean in 12 scenarios the parties hadn't considered yet. She called Andre at 7:15 on a Thursday morning. "I've reviewed everything," she said. "The IP is clean. The non-compete is as Francis read it. What you have is a protectable methodology and a licensing path. What you need is documentation of independent development." "I have it," Andre said. "Timestamps on the documents, my personal laptop, no firm equipment." "Good," she said. "Then we proceed." Andre's attorney on the divorce proceedings was a man named Philip Cross, who had been recommended by his brother-in-law, and who came back to Andre's first call within 2 hours. Philip read the filing and asked Andre for a full accounting of the marital assets. Andre gave it, accurately, completely, without omission and without strategy. He was not a man who believed that the truth required management. Philip called back the next day. "I need to ask you about something," Philip said. "There's a business entity that was registered 4 months ago, in Janelle's name alone. The registration lists the marital address." Andre said, "I didn't know about that." "I thought you might not," Philip said. He paused. "The entity appears to be a consulting firm. The business account attached to it shows 3 deposits, the first in November, the second in December, the third in January. Total deposits, $47,200. The funds originated from a joint account you and Janelle held." Andre was quiet for a moment. He thought about the EMBA he had covered. He thought about $74,000. He thought about the non-compete clause and the 12 pages and the 6:30 meeting with Victor and the river birch in the yard. He thought about what Francis had said. "You carry everything yourself. You've never once asked someone else to hold a load for you." He said, "Philip, add it to the accounting." Philip said, "Already done." The forensic accountant Philip engaged. A woman named Dorothy Sims, retired federal examiner, silver hair, the economy of language of someone who had spent 30 years saying exactly what she meant and nothing additional. Confirmed the $47,200 in transferred funds, and traced the consulting entity's operating account to 3 client payments from a firm Janelle had been consulting for a while, employed at her current company. The payments had been structured as independent contractor income, income that had not appeared on the joint tax filing for the prior year. Dorothy set her findings on the table with the specific calm of someone who had seen this pattern before and found it neither surprising nor requiring comment beyond the numbers. "The entity should have been disclosed in the asset filing," she said. It wasn't. The divorce settlement negotiation took 6 weeks. Philip handled it with the methodical patience of someone who had read every document completely and was not in a hurry to be anywhere other than in the correct position. The settlement reflected the actual assets, including the consulting entity's accounts and the transferred $47,200. It reflected Andre's contribution to the EMBA program, documented by 3 years of payment records he had kept without knowing he was going to need them. It reflected the marital estate accurately. Washington Structural Analytics was not on the table. It had been incorporated the day after the 6:30 meeting, before the divorce filing had technically been processed by the court. And its founding IP predated the filing by 4 days of documented independent development on a personal device. Grace had been precise about the timeline. The company was Andre's. Janelle's attorneys made 2 attempts to include it. Philip responded with Dorothy's documentation and Grace's IP timeline on both occasions. On the second occasion, Janelle's lead attorney went quiet on the call for long enough that Philip noted it in his file. The settlement was signed on a Thursday in May, 3 months after the parking garage. It did not happen all at once. Washington Structural Analytics signed its first licensing agreement with Victor's company in April, 6 weeks after incorporation. The methodology, the 12 pages that had become 47 by March, and eventually a formal technical specification, was integrated into Victor's computational platform over the following 8 months. The first commercial client came in June, the second in August. By the following February, 12 months from the parking garage, the platform had 12 paying clients in the infrastructure and commercial real estate sectors. By the second year, the client list had grown to 31. Victor's company, which held the exclusive licensing rights to Andre's methodology within the platform, raised a Series B funding round in the second year, at a valuation that reflected what the methodology was producing. Andre's equity stake in that round, based on the licensing agreement Grace had drafted with the 12 scenarios in mind, was valued at just under $200 million. The $500 million figure came in the fourth year when a strategic acquirer made an offer for Victor's company that valued the combined entity at $1. $4 billion and Andre's stake at $503 million. He had turned it down. He was not yet done building. Janelle had moved twice in 4 years. She was not homeless and not publicly diminished. She was carrying the specific weight of a person who had made a calculation about what a man was worth at the lowest moment of his visible trajectory, and who now passed his name in business publications without having a clean way to account for the distance between that calculation and what the name now represented. She was not cruel, and she had not been cartoon villainous. She had been ambitious, and she had been wrong about what she was standing on. Those two things together produced a consequence that was precise and proportional. He had not arranged it. He had simply built something true. Frances was the Chief Technical Officer of Washington Structural Analytics. She had an equity stake that had made her financial situation irreversibly comfortable at 61, which was the age at which she had always said she would stop worrying about money. She had stopped worrying about money. She drove a new car. She still wore the reading glasses on the lanyard. She still read the hard pages first. Philip Cross had 3 Washington Structural Analytics referrals from Andre in the second year. Dorothy Sims was retired and gardening. Victor was building the next thing, which was always what Victor was doing. Andre answered every call the same day. He kept 2 drafting pencils, one behind his ear, one in his jacket pocket. He drove a different car now, though he had not chosen it for the statement it made. He had chosen it because it was structurally sound, and he had a long commute, and he did not believe in replacing something that did what it was supposed to do. He gave accurate timelines. He hit them. On a clear morning in late October, 4 years and 8 months from the parking garage, Andre stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Washington Structural Analytics office on the 22nd floor and looked out at the city, the skyline he had spent 16 years contributing to from inside other people's firms, in the invisible language of load paths and transfer plates and the quiet arithmetic of things that hold. He had a meeting in 40 minutes. He was early. He was always early. He held a drafting pencil in his right hand, not because he needed it for the meeting, but because it was what he held. He looked at the building 3 blocks north, a mid-rise commercial tower, 12 years old, his stamp on the structural drawings in the permit office basement. He had never told anyone that. He had put it there and moved to the next thing. He thought once about the parking garage, the fluorescent light, the 9 minutes, the 4 minutes after the phone notification. He thought about the river birch in the yard of a house that was no longer his. He wondered if it was still there. He decided it probably was. Trees tended to outlast the decisions made in the houses beside them. His assistant knocked and opened the door. "They're setting up the room," she said. He turned from the window. "Tell them I'll be right in," he said. He put the pencil in his jacket pocket. He walked toward the door. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.